£4. That is what it costs. A white plastic tube, about a foot long, sitting in the sealant aisle of every hardware store in the country, usually on the bottom shelf under the silicones where nobody bothers looking. And that tube will close a hairline crack in your wall or your ceiling and keep it closed. Not for a season. Not until the weather turns. Permanently. Meanwhile, there is a roll of self-adhesive mesh tape hanging on a hook 2 aisles over with the word crack repair printed across the front of it in big letters, costing you $5 or $6, and I want you to walk straight past it. That roll has cost more people, more weekends than almost anything else sold in a hardware shop. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why it cannot do the job it is sold for. Subscribe if you want more of this, because I am going to give you the whole method, start to finish, and it takes about 20 minutes a crack. Let me start with why you are here. You have got a hairline crack. Maybe it runs along the top of the wall where the ceiling meets it. Maybe it comes up out of the corner of a door frame at an angle. Maybe it is straight down the middle of a ceiling, following a line you cannot see but can absolutely guess at. And you have almost certainly already fixed it. Once, probably twice. You filled it, you sanded it, you painted it, it looked perfect. And then one morning about 4 months later, the light came in low across that wall, and there it was again. Same crack. Same place. Same hair-thin line. That experience makes people think crack repair is hard. It is not hard. It is just that the product almost everybody reaches for is physically incapable of doing it. And once you swap the material, the job becomes almost embarrassingly easy. So here is what is actually happening in your wall. That crack exists because something moved. That is the only reason cracks ever exist. Timber shrinking as it dries out over the first few years of a house. A ceiling flexing when somebody walks across the room above. Seasonal changes pushing and pulling the frame of your house by fractions of a millimeter over and over every single year, and doing it in opposite directions in winter and summer. The movement is tiny, it is also relentless, and it is never going to stop. Your house is a timber and plaster structure sitting in weather, and it breathes. Now, what do you put in that crack? Filler is rigid. Joint compound is rigid. Both of them dry hard, and then they have no give in them whatsoever. So you have filled a moving gap with a material that cannot move, and the very first time that wall does the thing it has been doing every year since it was built, your filler has one option available to it. It splits. And here is the part that catches people out. It splits in exactly the same line, because that is where the movement is concentrated. So it looks like the old crack has come back and people conclude the filler failed or that they did not push it in hard enough. Neither. The filler did precisely what a hard material does when you stretch it. Now let us talk about mesh tape, because this is where the frustration really sets in. Somebody tells you the answer is to reinforce it. Fair enough. That sounds sensible. So you buy the roll of self-adhesive fiberglass mesh, you stick it over the crack, you cover it with compound, you sand it, you paint it. 2 problems with that, and they compound each other. The first is that mesh tape has stretch in it. It is an open woven grid, and a grid can elongate. Pull on the 2 sides of a piece of mesh and the weave opens up slightly. So the one property you actually needed from your reinforcement, which is that it does not move, is the property mesh does not have. The second is that you have now built a rigid sandwich over a moving joint. Compound underneath, mesh in the middle, compound on top, the whole lot going hard as it dries. And a rigid patch spanning a joint that moves has exactly one future, and it does not matter how neatly you applied it. So what happens is one of 2 things. Either it splits down the middle again, right along the crack, which is the usual outcome and is what most people get. Or, if you did a genuinely good job and made that patch really strong, the crack does not come back through the middle. It appears 2 inches away, along the edge of your tape where the strong bit stops and the ordinary wall starts. That second outcome is the one that makes people give up entirely, because they did everything right and the wall got worse. They did not make it worse. They simply moved the failure line sideways. You cannot beat movement with strength. You will lose every time, because the house is bigger than your repair. What you do instead is stop fighting it. Which brings me to the tube. What is in there is a flexible acrylic sealant. Some tubes say decorator's caulk, some say painter's caulk, some say flexible filler. The good ones will tell you on the label how much movement they will take, and they are the ones you want, but the plain white 4-pound tube in any hardware shop is the same category of material, and it is what I want you to buy today. It is a rubber. That is the whole point. When it cures, it stays permanently flexible, and it stays bonded to both sides of whatever you put it in. So when your wall does its annual 1/4 millimeter in January, the sealant stretches. And in July, when the wall comes back, the sealant comes back with it. It does that in year 1, and in year 5, and in year 20. There is nothing to fail, because nothing is being asked to resist anything. That is why the repair is permanent. Not because the material is stronger than the movement, but because it does not care about the movement at all. I will tell you about the house that taught me this, because it took me longer than I would like to admit. Semi-detached place in Doncaster, back bedroom, crack along the ceiling line running the full width of the room. The owner had filled it twice herself. I came in and did it properly, the way I had been taught. Cut it out, mesh tape, setting compound, 3 coats, feathered wide, sanded flat, primed, painted the whole ceiling. 2 evenings and a Saturday morning. It looked immaculate. She rang me the following February. So I went back and did it again, and this time I did it better. Wider tape, more coats, feathered out 18 inches either side. Beautiful job. Best taping I had done that year. She rang me the February after that, and this time the crack was not down the middle of my repair. It had appeared 2 inches out, along the edge of where my tape stopped. That was the moment it finally landed. I had not failed twice. I had succeeded twice at building something rigid across a joint that was never going to stop moving, and the wall had simply cracked wherever my strong bit ended. The stronger I made it, the further out it went. Third time, I went back with a tube. 20 minutes. That was 11 years ago, and that ceiling line has not moved since. Right, the method. And there are 5 steps, and every one of them matters. Step 1. Open the crack out. I know how this sounds. You have got a hairline crack you want to disappear, and the first thing I am telling you to do is take a blade to it and make it bigger. But think about what we just said. That sealant works by stretching. And a film of material 1/1000th of an inch thick has nothing in it to stretch with. There is no body there. It will simply tear the first time the wall moves, and you will have wasted an afternoon. You need a bead with some depth to it. So you cut it out. Take a sharp utility knife, or the corner of a scraper, or ideally a proper triangular crack opening tool if you have got one, and run it along the length of the crack. Angle the blade so you are cutting a shallow V, taking away the paint and the old filler either side, opening it out to something like 1/8 of an inch wide at the surface. Go along it 2 or 3 times, in both directions, and run it slightly past each end of the visible crack. Cracks grow at their tips. If you stop your repair exactly where the crack currently stops, you have left a stress point sitting right at the end of it, and that is where it will start again. Step 2. Clean it out properly. Brush the whole length out with a dry brush, then vacuum it, then wipe it with a cloth that is barely damp. Anything loose, anything crumbling, any paint lifting at the edges, get it off now. This step is not optional, and it is the one people skip. Sealant bonds by gripping the 2 faces of the groove. If those faces are coated in dust, It grips dust, and dust is not attached to anything. The most common way a caulk joint fails is that it lets go cleanly from one side, and almost every time that is because it never really bonded to that side in the first place. Step 3. Gun it in, and gun it in properly. Cut the nozzle at a shallow angle and cut it small, smaller than you think. You can always trim more off. You cannot put it back, and an oversized hole means sealant all over the face of your wall. Now, work the material into the crack rather than laying it along the top of it. Hold the gun at an angle, push the nozzle into the groove, and drive a steady beat along the length, pushing ahead of you rather than dragging behind. You want that groove filled from the bottom up with no voids in it. Take your time and keep the pressure even. If you get a gap, go back over it. What you are building down in there is the actual repair. Everything after this is cosmetics. Step 4, and this is where a good repair separates from a rough one. Strike it off flush. Take a filling knife or a flexible taping knife and run it down the crack with the blade held almost square to the wall, at 70 or 80 degrees, pressing firmly. What that does is force the sealant down into the groove and scrape the surface completely clean at the same time. You want it dead flush. Not proud, not smeared out wide, not sitting in a rounded bead on the surface. Flush. Flexible material packed into the groove, and the face of your wall clean either side of it. Then take a damp cloth and wipe the whole area over while it is still wet, because anything you leave on the surface now is going to be there permanently. This material does not sand. You cannot come back tomorrow and flatten it off. Whatever shape you leave it in during these 30 seconds is the shape it stays in, so get it right while it is wet. If it is a corner joint, ceiling to wall, or along the top of the skirting, then you tool it slightly differently. There, you want a neat concave line, and a wet fingertip runs smoothly down the joint in one pass is the tool for that, followed by wiping the excess off both faces with the damp cloth. One pass. Do not keep going back to it. Step 5. Let it cure, then finish it. Give it a full day, and 2 if the room is cold, because the surface skins over long before the middle of the bead has set. Painting it too early gives you a wrinkled, crazed finish as the paint dries on something that is still moving underneath. Then, on a flat wall, skim a thin coat of filler over the top of the line and feather it out either side. Not because the sealant needs covering for strength, it does not, but because it gives you a sandable surface so you can blend the repair perfectly into the wall around it. Thin coat, let it dry, sand it lightly, and it disappears. Then, prime the area and paint to a natural break. Corner to corner, or the whole ceiling. Do not paint a patch, because fresh paint against old paint shows up even when the color matches exactly. That is the whole job. 20 minutes of work, a day of waiting, and a crack that does not come back. And I want to spend a moment on why this lasts, because I know some of you are skeptical, and you are right to be. You have been told a fix was permanent before. Think about what is actually being asked of the material. A rigid filler in a moving crack is being asked to be stronger than a house. It has to resist the force of a timber frame expanding, which is an enormous force generated by a very large object, applied slowly and repeatedly. It has no chance. A hairline of hard filler against a whole building is not a fair contest, and the filler loses on the first cold snap. The sealant is not being asked to resist anything. It is being asked to stretch about 1/4 of a millimeter and then relax again. That is nothing. That is well inside what the material does comfortably over and over indefinitely. There is no accumulating stress and no fatigue point being approached, because it never comes close to its limit in the first place. That is the whole reason one is permanent and the other is not. It has nothing to do with quality or price. It is that one product is in a fight it cannot win, and the other product is not in a fight at all. The other thing worth knowing is that it stays bonded. A properly cleaned groove gives that sealant two faces to grip. And because it flexes rather than shears, that bond never gets shock-loaded. Hard filler in a moving joint puts all the strain right at the bond line, which is why old filler repairs often come away in a strip rather than cracking down the middle. Flexible material spreads that strain through its own body instead of dumping it at the edges. Now let me give you the specific one, because I would put money on this being a lot of you. If your crack runs exactly along the line where the ceiling meets the wall, and it opens up in winter and closes again in summer, that is truss uplift. The roof trusses in your loft have a cold, dry top and a warm, damp bottom sitting under the insulation. The timber moves differently top and bottom, the truss bows upward through the cold months, and it lifts your ceiling away from the wall it is nailed to. That can be 1/4 of an inch of movement. Sometimes more. That is the crack that has beaten more people than any other. And it is the crack that mesh tape absolutely cannot touch. There is not a taping job in the world that survives 1/4 inch of seasonal movement. It will crack again every January for as long as you own the house. The tube handles it without breaking a sweat, because 1/4 of an inch is nothing to a rubber. Open it out, clean it, gun it in, tool it, paint it. Done, and done for good. And once you start looking at your house this way, you will find the same tube fixes 5 or 6 other things you have been refilling for years. The gap along the top of the skirting board where the timber meets the plaster, that opens because the floor moves and the wall does not. Filler in there cracks every winter without fail. The mitters on the architrave around your doors, where the two pieces have opened up a hair. Timber shrinks across its width as it dries out, and a door gets slammed a few thousand times a year. The internal corners between two walls, especially in a newer house where the framing is still giving up moisture. Around a chimney breast, or a boxed-in beam, where plasterboard meets something structural. Where a stair string meets the wall, which flexes every time somebody walks up it. Every one of those is the same problem and the same 4-pound answer. Tell me down in the comments where your crack is, and whether it comes back at a particular time of year. Ceiling line, door corner, skirting, middle of a wall. And tell me how many times you have already filled it. Because I have a feeling the honest answers are going to be higher than people want to admit, and I would like everybody to see they are not alone in this. Now, a few practical bits that will save you some annoyance. Buy a paintable tube. It will say so on the label. Do not buy silicone for this, because paint will not stick to silicone in any meaningful way. It beads up and peels off, and if you have already put silicone somewhere you now want to paint, the only fix is to cut the whole lot out and start again with the right material. Get a decent caulking gun. The cheapest ones have a ratchet that judders, and it is very difficult to lay a smooth bead with one. 10 pounds gets you a smooth action gun with a proper release trigger, and it makes an enormous difference to how neat your work looks. Release the pressure on the gun the moment you stop. Otherwise, it keeps oozing after you have lifted it away, and you will have sealant where you did not want it. Have your damp cloth in your other hand before you start, not on the far side of the room. The window for tooling and wiping is short, and when you have finished the tube for the day, push a nail into the nozzle to seal it, or the whole tip sets solid, and you lose the rest of the tube. One last thing, and then I will let you get on. The reason this knowledge is not common is not that it is complicated. You have just watched me explain it in about 15 minutes, and there is not a single difficult skill in there. Anybody can run a bead of sealant. Anybody can pull a knife down a wall. The reason it is not common is that the hardware shop makes more money selling you a 5-pound roll of mesh tape and a tub of filler every 18 months than it makes selling you one 4-pound tube that ends the problem. The word crack on the front of that mesh packaging is doing an enormous amount of work, and it points you at a product that guarantees you will be back in the shop before the next winter is out. You will not be. Not for this crack anyway. Go and open one out tonight. The worst one. The one you have already done twice. Cut it into a V, clean it, fill it with the tube, strike it flush. And forget about it. Then come back to this video next spring and tell me it is still closed. Because it will be. I am Dave Mercer. Thank you for listening to Dave Mercer.